Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Crane. You can find all of my content at legendaryupside.com. Today, I am joined by Daniel Racz and Kyle Dvorchak. We are talking post-combine best ball rankings changes. We just emerged from the lab after tweaking a bunch of the ranks. Dalton Schultz kind enough to also sign his contract right at the end of that call, so we bumped him up. But yeah, guys, how you doing?
Doing well. Pat buried the lead a little bit. This is going to be a Dalton Schultz podcast with adjusting him by a few rounds and then also reacting to the NFL Combine.
Yeah, we don't even have time to react to the Combine. It's already in the
one
review.
main topic of the show, right? But we've got a little bit of banter at the beginning. We'll tack some news on to the end. The main topic of this show is Dalton Schultz. 3 years. I don't know how much, but
3 years and enough that he's going to be out there with CJ Stroud. So we did bump him up. We will get to that. But yeah, let's talk the Combine. Any kind of like high level takeaways from you guys? Players, just kind of general sentiment on kind of how the weekend went overall. Just kind of thoughts before we dive in.
Yeah, I think when we look at how the market reacted, rarely were players dinged for either not going to the Combine or performing poorly, but the ones that did well rightfully were moved up. So we sort of had to reckon with, are we just boosting players that did well, but then adjusting how should we dock players that perform poorly? And then looking at the quarterback carousel, coupling that with free agency, with J.J. McCarthy coming in 15 pounds over the negative downside cases, we're kind of feeling good about him as a locked-in top 12, top 13 pick.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, I definitely feel good about the rankings being high on the rookies before the Combine, because it does feel like rookies moved up post-Combine. Not a lot of rookies have fallen. I think we will see some rookies fall. But maybe, I don't know, like the next shoe to drop here is draft capital, and this tournament will be closed. So there's kind of like, how much does a Troy Franklin fall now that he's likely to be a second round pick instead of a late first round pick after weighing 175 and running a 4.41? We were hoping he was 183 and he ran a 4.31. And I think at that point, maybe he's a late first rounder. But does he fall that much before the end of the Combine? Maybe or before the draft, the end of the tournament? Maybe he does, but I don't think he's going to crater. And so generally, I think my post-Combine feeling is like getting right on some of the guys we were too low on. One of which is Jalen Wright, who in the last video, someone commented that we were way too low on him because he was going to blow up the Combine, and then he did. So you were right. We have raised him. But there's I think generally we've raised rookies. We did lower some rookies, Franklin being one of them, but not like dramatically. But he is behind ADP now. But yeah, I think that's a interesting way in terms of, being maybe a note for next year. Not that we really needed additional reasons to be bullish on the rookies, but you're probably just hunting for those guys who shoot up in ADP, and it's not going to be super, super risky because at least so far, none of them have really fallen that much. Any notes, any kind of high level stuff for you, Kyle?
No, I thought it was a really good showing from the wide receiver class, which is why Troy Franklin is like the one big faller. Was his Combine terrible? No, it probably wasn't terrible. I don't think you'd call it terrible. He came in below speed expectation, below weight, but like he didn't bomb the Combine. It's that Xavier Worthy set the 40-yard dash record. It's that A.D. Mitchell posted one of the like 10 best overall RAS scores in the RAS database. Like Brian Thomas absolutely nuked his 40. And all of these guys who like, I could see an NFL team convincing them Troy Franklin's their third receiver, their fourth receiver. All of them gave them reasons to not do that, where he was maybe a first round pick before. So many guys leapt him, and his Combine was disappointing. That overall really exciting for like your dynasty drafts and whatnot. He is the one though, like, in reference to how good everyone was, that's why we think he should fall. And Daniel, you pulled up ADP. It's only 3 days of ADP. And it was like Troy Franklin up 2.2 picks. And we're like, how is that possible? To your point, Pat, like the market doesn't seem to care when things don't go well at the Combine. They just love boosting the guys who did great.
Yeah. Well, to Daniel's point, but I think Franklin's kind of interesting because I still feel good about getting him in the 120s. the 115 range, like that still feels fine. He comes in at 101 now for us, so now we're going to be a little bit behind ADP on him. But if you've been drafted off the ranks, you have plenty, and at a cheaper price than he is now. So bailed out a little bit by the rising cost. If we're trying to feel a little bit better about the closing line value, I think he should probably settle in maybe more around like 105 if I was, in charge of ADP. That's where I think he should that's sort of like fair value, I think. So he has, he's about around, he got a bit of a round too high on reasonable bullishness about how he would do at the combine. That didn't come through, and so he should fall probably by about a round. But I think the running backs are another interesting kind of macro topic where a couple running backs I think really helped themselves. Trey Benson and Jalen Wright would be the two that kind of jumped to the top of mind. A couple running backs that really hurt themselves, I think Audric Estime, who we've nuked in the rankings. It's just tough. It reminds me of Dwayne McBride, kind of like an interesting college profile, but this is the type of combine. Anytime you're slower than 4.7, UDFA is on the table. And so I just think with an opportunity-based position like running back at this point, I don't really want to be drafting a lot more Estime. And I liked his, I liked the highlights. He was fun, but I like Dwayne McBride's highlights too, though. The other faller for me is Blake Corum, who I had come around to. I have like literally 2 days of bullishness in this entire process on him. I came around to the idea that he was going to get drafted pretty high, like, maybe sneak into the back end of the second round, has a chance to operate as like a true kind of starter, maybe like the Cam Akers rookie mold where, at the end of the season, he's kind of taking over the backfield. They're leaning on him. He's good enough. But he came in at 205. That's concerning to me for that kind of full outcome. Like I want him to be 215 if I'm kind of betting on this guy is penciled in as the, going to be the starting running back for this team down the stretch, maybe by mid-season, goes in like the 5th, 6th round by the end of August, like that kind of like we hit the nut outcome, type of situation. I just feel like Trey Benson now has a 216 and more athletic. That's kind of the way I want to place my bets. If I'm looking for that kind of guy. So yeah, I'm kind of back out on Blake Corum.
I will say he crushed the agility drills, which are really good for running backs who have crushed those, have generally been successful. I still think he'll probably get draft capital, but like, had we just never tried to get like a few weeks ago, we were like, what are people doing with Blake Corum? And we talked about him. Like, I guess we should probably raise him up a little bit. We probably could have just stood to keep him where we had a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is like I could see us getting to Zach Charbonnet kind of level last year. I mean, like I could see him being that kind of bet where you're like you're taking this guy in the 9th round because you feel like maybe he forces a committee by the end of the season. But I don't know. At 205, he's not like that great of a pass catcher. So it's just like it's a little the path. I'm not sure like what the path to him being like an awesome fantasy guy is outside of like maybe a contingency play. So he feels maybe like I think he's probably going to be more of like a Tank Bigsby type of draft pick.
Yeah.
But we also like I would like to see the draft capital come through as well. So we have him in the pure ranks right behind Elijah Mitchell, which is behind ADP, but we're ahead of ADP on Elijah Mitchell. But it's like, well, I know Elijah Mitchell's the number 2. Like I know I have serious contingent value with Elijah Mitchell. I think we're hoping for it with Corum, and then there is some scenarios where he is in a much better situation where he's like part of a committee or whatever. But anyway, Bucky Irving, I think, is the other guy that probably lost some steam after the combine. 3.72 RAS. It's a big no thanks. It can be overcome, right? Kyron Williams famously had a terrible RAS. I think this is even worse than his, though.
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah. So that's just, I mean, we're talking draft capital now. You know, he's not gonna be a day 2 pick with this RAS. So we've lowered him. But let's go ahead and kind of dive into some of the changes that we made. We can start with wide receivers. Let's start with the Texas guys. Both of them came up in the rankings. Xavier Worthy had a roller coaster ride where he starts out being way smaller than we were hoping, but then runs the fastest 40 ever. So he's got to come up.
Yeah, I was watching the weigh-in. We got 165. We said it's so over. I went to sleep being here in the UK, woke up, saw that he shattered the combine record, and then it's so back. You know, it's tough to be low on the fastest player ever, especially pre-draft when you're looking at mock drafts, and he's, I think, a coin flip. I think other people think more likely than not to be a first-round pick. And being a late first-round pick with the possible landing spots probably means he's closer to a top 100 pick. And even if he's an early second-round pick, and I think early, maybe mid-second is the true floor for a 4.21 speed for a player that had a fine college profile, even at 165 pounds. So he's someone that we're raised and probably going to keep an overweight position on.
Yeah, I'm a little more bullish that he goes in the first round because he was starting to get some first round hype before the combine and then goes out and crushes the 40. I think I'd probably put him a little closer to like 60-40 to go in the first round. Splitting hairs, but like if you want to talk about splitting hairs, guess what we did an hour before this show nonstop is split hairs on all these guys. That's why we think the rankings are good. So I think he's a little more likely to go in the first round, and the landing spots at the back of the first round are really strong. And the fact that AD Mitchell showed really well at the combine is also good for Worthy, because if you are saying like, oh, Worthy can hang with an NFL receiver at the college level, and then we find out AD is a supreme NFL athlete, the fact that his teammate prospect is even better than we thought also reflects well on him. And the same goes for AD.
That's a good point. Yeah. And Worthy was very productive at Texas. 39% dominator rating as a true freshman, 33% as a true sophomore. Actually fell off this year. This was his worst year, 23%. But if you've got a career dominator rating above 30%, he was at 31% as a true 3-year player, 18.6 breakout age with 4.21 speed. I mean, obviously the size is a little bit of a problem. It's concerning, but I mean, we just saw Tank Dell go off, so it's not going to prevent him from having a really strong season. So it is a red flag, but in addition to the athleticism, we have production, which we always want. And AD Mitchell, I think, is an interesting guy to talk through because the size plus the athleticism for him, but we don't have the production. But I think we feel even better about him going in the first round now. So we have him even more above ADP. And I guess archetype-wise, it's just easier for me to see how AD Mitchell blows up this year than Worthy with how undersized he was. I think he, certainly if he lands with a really good quarterback, then we feel pretty good about Worthy's ability to have a great rookie season. But of the two, Mitchell now seems more likely to get better quarterback play because he's more likely to land in the late first where all the good quarterbacks are drafting. So it's a little tricky. Like we talked about the last pod. We flip-flopped a bunch of times on Mitchell versus Worthy. After the combine, it does get harder not to have Mitchell ahead.
Yeah, I will say this is sort of tangential to Worthy is he was like a 17 ADOT player as a true freshman, his best dominator season, and that fell until it was somewhere, I think, 10 or 12 as a third-year player. And it turns out if you use the guy with 4.2 speed on short stuff, he's not going to be quite as productive as you let that guy who no one to have ever played football can run speed with. You try and turn him into a 10 A-dot guy, and it didn't go as well. So maybe there's a lesson to be learned there, Texas.
Yeah, it's weird how that works.
But no, I'm generally on board. I think AD Mitchell is more likely to go in the first. I think they're both better than 50-50 bets to go in the first. He's also more likely to go 5 to even like 10 picks higher, depending on how late Worthy goes, how early Mitchell goes. And like you said, as much as like the athleticism for Worthy is specifically the speed and the production are great, the fact that there are like essentially no good players like to have ever looked like him is a concern. There are reasons that no one has ever looked like him because it's hard to be as fast as he is and have any reasonable size. But like Tank Dell was the first player to do it since like the 80s. So, and not that like the NFL is gonna assuage some of those concerns because they're gonna say that's okay. We are putting that aside. And when the NFL puts it aside, we can kind of vibe the same way. It's like the NFL doesn't care you're 165. They're seeing your ability to overcome that size. We shouldn't be too hung up on it. Like, it's at least worth noting that like it's almost literally never happened before.
Yeah, and to go off what Kyle's saying, it's not just that no one has succeeded at Worthy's size. No one has been his size. Tank Dell was 5'8", 165. Worthy is 5'11", 165. This is a true one-of-one. The closest physical comp is Marquise Brown, but I think he's 5'9", give or take. So we're dealing with a true outlier, and it's tough to project. Whereas if we're looking at guys, Audric Estime being a great example. He's in a bucket of running backs that run a 4.7 or worse 40. That's generally such a bad group. You rarely see hits from there.
I couldn't find a hit from there in the past like 10 years. The closest that we got were like Rex Burkhead and like Darrell Williams, and they like all had the same archetype of like can hang in the NFL and like does a lot of things okay. It's probably not actually what Estime profiles is as like that kind of guy. Those guys are pass catchers. So I literally could not find a guy at 4.7 plus who was successful in the past like 10 years. There's some high 4.6s. So like you are like picking a cutoff and he happens to fall on the wrong side of it. That like I think Josh Jacobs ran like a 4.6 at his pro day, no less. Been very successful, but man, 4.7 is bad. There's almost no one.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One, it's such a line in the sand that it's like if you can't, it's kind of like showing up at the combine at 199.
Yeah.
Like you knew you had to get to 200 and you couldn't. What does that say? What was the starting point? And it's like where was Audric before he started training? Mm-hmm. Like he couldn't get quite there. Like I don't know. It's just it's concerning. And then the other thing is, how does it fit with the style of player you are? And he's a one-cut, get up to speed right away runner. If the speed is 4.7, that's just not. I'm like, damn it! Like he's just not quite an NFL caliber running back. Is how I now feel. Like if he was 4.65, I would be okay.
Yep.
I wouldn't feel great. I would love for him to be, I think you want him to be 4.5. If this dude was 4.5,
4.59, get him under 4.6, and it's really strong. Get him to 4.6s, and it's doable. And I think even like I still think the stuff he did in college matters a lot. But at 4.7, the NFL is probably going to say otherwise. They're probably going to say you're a 7th round pick.
That's how I'm feeling too. And then it's like, well, now that's the thing. It's that his 40 now puts him most likely in another bucket where it's less likely for a guy to succeed. If the NFL just didn't care and he was a 2nd round pick, I don't care either. Maybe I would be lower on him than a typical 7th or 2nd round pick, but I wouldn't be out. But I think we're now trying to get ahead of draft capital that's going to be pretty weak compared to what it could have been. AD Mitchell, though, first of all, I guess a little mini apology. He did have a 32% dominator rating as a true junior.
Yeah, 3rd year breakout, Power 5 breakout, and early declare. Like
there was some production.
Yeah, he's not a bad prospect. He just doesn't look. I don't think he looks like your typical 1st round pick, like transfer, 3rd year breakout. But he's an early declare, Power 5 school. Like I'm not shocked that he would go in the 1st round, given that he's a supreme athlete. So like I don't think I was like low on him as a prospect heading into the combine, but I got it. It was a like power 5, 30% dominator, is really strong. And now he proves that he's an NFL plus caliber athlete. I get it. I'm on board.
Yeah. 1.68 career yards per out run, peaked this past year at 1.72. That's really bad. So I do think, it's like, why take AD Mitchell right now at 112th ahead of ADP? It's partly because like I don't really want to be taking him in the 8th round. So this is palatable. This dude could be a total bust. He could also be a first round wide receiver. You're getting outside the top 100 picks, who's super athletic, gets paired with a Josh Allen. Even I don't think Gabe Davis is good, and I would take him. I would smash him at 112 if he was back with the Bills. So I just think, this is kind of the way. If we're not excited about a guy going in the 8th round, it's almost a reason to prioritize him more. If we think his ADP is going to rise, let's get him outside the top 100 while we can. That's kind of where I'm at on AD Mitchell. Okay, let's talk this other group of wide receivers. Keon Coleman, feel a little worse about him after running a 4.61, given that he's supposed to be super athletic. Like, he didn't get any separation really in college, and now he is athletic, but he's not the
This is inexplicably the worst Racz over 9 I've ever seen. Which is it literally is right. I think it's like just over 9. I don't know. Pull it up.
Yeah.
Like, because we needed him. His whole sell is that whole sell is that maybe it's the speed actually isn't the end of the world, because part of it is like he can be a contested catch guy. But I do think in general, the whole sell is as a package, he may be the best athlete in his class. At least that was the sell. And at this point, he's a good athlete. He's a good athlete. But if you have like no finesse to your game and you're not hyper productive either, and you're just a good athlete, I mean, I still think he's probably getting drafted in the 1st round, but it's certainly not a move I would make as an
I don't think he goes in the 1st round.
I saw in the day or two after the combine, I think it was Brugler's mock and one of the ESPN's mock as well, still had him in the 1st. So, but maybe he doesn't go. Like we're trash talking him as much as we are. Like, I wouldn't take him in the 1st.
Yeah, I would put his draft capital prop at 36, 37 and a half. So again, I think median outcome is an early 2nd round pick with an outside but possible chance at the 1st. I think there is the likely, Quentin Johnston-esque just complete zero his rookie year, completely falls apart, because if we can find these glaring holes in a profile and if they come to fruition, he's not going to be productive no matter his landing spot. But we can also squint and see the 9+ Racz, decent, not great, but decent prospect who could get a good landing spot. So we don't want to be getting zero. And again, with all rookies, you're getting to tap into Pandora's box, get the unknown, capture a more likely positive tail outcome as well as the negative. So we don't have a full zero on Keon, but a lot of rookies we like more.
No one's going to like this, but I would compare him a little bit to Jonathan Mingo. Early 2nd round pick.
It's so funny. So I was trying to find the mock drafts that had him 1st round, and I found Brugler's didn't have it, found Zerline's didn't have it. And I found the latest one on ESPN, 33rd to the Panthers, is exactly what they had. And sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but when you said that and it came up on my screen at the exact same time, I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
I love it. Yeah, no, I think, look, is he a better prospect than Mingo? He definitely is. He's an early declare. Yeah. He was productive in his final season, 34% dominator rating as a true junior. So we get the breakout season. He was also productive in 2022 at Michigan State with a 29% dominator rating. So not fair to just, call him Jonathan Mingo from like a pure prospect profile. He's a better prospect, but I think you're mostly drafting him for the draft capital, and kind of like he's a raw type of dude who's winning with athleticism to a degree. Like that is kind of the scouting report on him, is that, He's not very refined. So but I kind of bring up Mingo in a weird way as a positive, where there's like a limit to how out you want to be on an early second round pick who's got size and athleticism. And so I kind of like, this is where I feel comfortable with the bet. If he lands in a good spot, then he needs to come up and will come up, and we'll end up being behind, but higher than we are now. It's probably what will happen. But, there's a lot of wide receivers in this class, and any one of them could land in a good spot. Any one of them could land in a bad spot. So it's like, it's tough for me as we think through these wide receivers, and especially the ones we don't like, where you're trying to be humble about it and be like, well, this dude could be, Josh Allen's number 2 or something. That's pretty exciting. But like, so many of these guys could be Josh Allen's number 2, and one of them probably will be, but he could also be Bryce Young's number 2. That's not so anyway, I think that's kind of where my head's at with Coleman. I would bet that we end up, kind of around here most of the rest of the way, and that could ultimately end up being like a big bear stance or a big bull stance, depending on that kind of. I doubt we get much lower. I think we could raise if he lands in a really good spot, but I doubt we get a ton lower. I could see his ADP falling quite a bit past this, though.
Yeah. And like you said, there are a lot of wide receivers that could be Josh Allen's number 2. There are a lot of wide receivers that could go ahead of Keon Coleman. Draft capital still now is in probabilities. It's uncertain. And I think there's a chance that he's the one that's falling. If you spend enough time on Twitter looking at what film evaluators are saying, even reputable ones, I think they're poking a lot more holes in Keon Coleman's game than they are in any of the top 6 to 10 wideouts. So I think that of all the guys projected to get early draft capital, Keon would shock me the least if he fell into round 3. And I think we're trying to account for that by having the bear position now, because if he goes later than expected, if he gets a poor landing spot, we won't have to adjust as much. And we think it's less likely than the market does that he goes either in the first round or to the good landing spots that the market's perhaps wish casting.
Right. Lad McConkey, a guy that we were not in on ahead of the combine. We like the rookies generally, so we were at ADP heading into the combine, but not someone. We talked about this last time. Like, I was like, I'm not going to promise to stay even with ADP on Lad McConkey. We could end up fading him. He ran pretty fast. So, 4.39 40 makes me, feel like this dude could sneak into the back end of the first round. And more importantly, he's going to go in the second round. He's not going to fall to the third. So, he's kind of like a floor pick generally. You're like, this guy's like a professional wide receiver out of the gate. But I like that now. I feel very good about, and he's also going to have second round draft capital at worst to go with that. Not very productive, 4-year guy, but was efficient. Really strong yards per out run over the course of his career. Finished really strong as well. Lots of holes you can poke in terms of the analytical stuff, but has been someone that the film guys have been in on the entire way. The athleticism is only going to help. I think the draft capital will come in strong to very strong. And so at this point, like, I guess it's a similar situation where, like, I would rather take McConkey at this price than trying to grab him in the 8th, 9th round. I don't really have any interest in that. So it's a similar maybe thing to AD Mitchell, where it's like, hey, he's a pretty good bet now to get uncomfortable. And at 126, it seems fine. So I'm going to try to get some now. No thoughts on Lad? I'm the Lad slappy among the crew.
Yeah.
These guys don't want to hear it.
In our call, we we're really squinting to find reasons to like that. And, he had fine production in the games Brock Bowers didn't play. But at the end of the day, if we think he's possibly going to rise later, and also we want to be in on rookie wide receivers, we want enough humility in our own evaluation. So I think McConkey's a fine pick, possible to rise. And like you said, I mean, Tim Robinson meme, evergreen. We're all trying to find the guys that put Sky Moore as rookie year so far up because of his landing spot. And the market doesn't necessarily ding the negative ones as much. Or maybe it overly dings that. I'm sure, but we were getting Garrett Wilson at the 9-10 turn, Jahan Dotson at pick 132 just 2 years ago. So, the price of the brick, if the brick is the rookie wide receiver, has went up, as Marlo would say in The Wire.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Roman Wilson, another guy that we are feeling better about after the combine, but I just like his profile as well. I mean, it's not like a bulletproof profile, but I've kind of felt like discount Lad McConkey the whole way. And another guy that I could see sneaking into the first round, we also got the, the air miles per route run nugget last pod. I mean, this dude was really checking a lot of boxes for a 4-year guy who wasn't all that productive.
Yeah, I feel like from a very high level, not to compare their play styles, but like imagine if Lad McConkey broke out. That's probably what Roman Wilson is. Like Power 5, stays in school for 4 years, but Wilson did, I believe, top of a 30% dominators.
38%. 38%.
Yeah.
Last year.
Very touchdown fuel, but he got there, and Lad, I don't think ever got close to a 30% dominator. So like, as far as guys who broke out late in their career, like do it at a strong Power 5 program and don't stay for 6
Win
years.
Win a national title.
Yeah, like there are worse profiles, and we're not having to pay for this at ranked at wide receiver 62, which is 14 spots ahead of ADP. So I don't know what he is in ADP, but it's got to be like wide receiver like 68 or something.
Yeah, what we got the ADP is 153. So yeah, I mean he's risen a lot. He used to be a guy that you could get in the 200s. Then I remember around pick 180 we started taking a bigger stance on him. And yeah, so he's risen substantially, but these are rounds where it doesn't really matter. These picks aren't worth very much.
He's a 2 or maybe 3. It's probably $2 auction value, and he went from undrafted to a $2 auction value.
Right. So I think we still want to be taking him. Like it's nice if you have a bunch of him early, and you probably have a fair amount if you've been using the rankings. But if you don't, like, reaching a little bit to get him now is totally fine. It's not, if he were to move up another 15 picks, then maybe, or I guess if he moved up like 15 picks above where we have him ranked, if he's a pick like 120, then okay, maybe we need to start thinking a little bit more about the price. But right now I'm feeling like, you still, he's not like the biggest priority ever, but I definitely like drafting Roman Wilson. I think that, where do you guys like, Daniel, do you see him as live for the end of the first round?
I think live in the sense of non-zero, I'd say it's 10%, maybe 5%, but I think he's probably a second round pick, maybe 10 to 20%, maybe 10 to 25% in the third round. But I think at the price that the market's offering, he's still a good buy.
So you think he still could fall to the third, even after a pretty strong combine?
Yeah, with how many receivers that there are, I think that there's inevitably going to be one that falls.
So, someone we're going to say, we had this guy, we all agreed that like a reasonable line is like pick 39 or pick 42. Like he's a mid to high first or second round pick, and there are just enough of them that one of them's going to get bad luck. And if it was going to be someone, it'd probably be like a didn't really produce anything in college player.
Yeah, and if we assign 10% probabilities to 10 to 15 receivers to go in round 3, inevitably one or two of them will. So we're not projecting round 3 for a specific one, but any of them could be.
Yeah, and I guess I don't think he did the jumps, so we don't have a Racz for him. But what was his 40? It was pretty good. Pulling it up here. 40 time 4.39. So you do like that. All right, Jalen Wright. We're in on Jalen Wright now. The YouTube comment was correct. He did, in fact, crush the combine. He also has pretty good size. So, I'd still say he like comes out. Like, I'm not like the most in on Jalen Wright in terms of like his statistical profile is still a little spotty, but you're getting what 9.81 RAS score. He's also pretty young. Finished up college at 20.8, so not even 21 years old. And yeah, I mean he's much more likely now, I think, or at least than I thought before, to get like pretty strong draft capital. So if we're hunting for the guy who could be, that second round pick and get slotted in as, the 1A in his rookie season, or he's like in position to be the 1A down the stretch. He's 210, so he's not like that much bigger than Blake Corum, but he's 5'11", 210, Corum 5'8", 205. Right, with the superior athleticism, does feel like a meaningfully better bet to just be like a 1A back, kind of a guy who's like a paying off a 6th round ADP at the end of August if everything from here on out goes perfect.
Yeah, with how weak the running back class is, and I talked about the receiver class showing really well at the combine. On the whole, the running back class, like Estime, if he shows well, could have been the RB3 in the class, but instead, like the great athletes were like Isaac Guerendo or whatever, like committee back, Tyrone Tracy, I believe, was like the 2nd or 3rd RAS, like former wide receiver, 6-year declare, like just super late into his like playing football career, and then it's Trey Benson crushed. But after that, like there's probably a pretty big mix of guys you could consider the 4th or 3rd running back. Corum was in there, Estime was in there, Wright was in there. To me, Wright, I don't want to say clearly separate himself, but put himself in a strong position to be the number 3 back of this class. That could end up, like we said, that could be the guy who gets late 2nd round draft capital, and by week 10 is just purely the starter on his team.
Yeah, and even with early or mid 3rd round draft capital, if the cards flop in the right way, he can still become the lead back even with 3rd round draft capital, which I think is far more likely now than it was a week ago. And a tidbit on Isaac Guerendo, he's not even in the underdog player pool. So talking about players that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Now, should we have Wright ahead of Corum?
Yes, I say we should.
I mean, we have to respect the market to some level. I would be shocked if our internal ranks didn't have Wright ahead of Corum, but given that there's a 33 spot,
I thought they did too, and we have them just like this. We have them 1 pick behind, but I flipped that.
Flip them. Do it, coward.
I flipped it.
Good move.
All right, so Wright comes out 1 spot ahead in the now. So by the time you watch this, we will have flipped this right now ahead of Blake Corum. Xavier Legette, he is another guy, kind of a McConkey style guy where we weren't that in. He was a little smaller than expected at the Senior Bowl, and that probably made me overly nervous about him. He's kind of like Keon Coleman-y, where it's like a lot of it is about the athleticism. And so I'm like, man, if the athleticism, any sign, I was very sensitive to signs about, how good the athleticism was, because it's so important to his profile, like that's the sell on him. But he's really athletic. So, post combine, knowing that, feeling better about, his draft capital now as well. I think we should be in on Xavier Legette unless he gets really expensive, and this is still pretty cheap.
I'm probably not gonna be on him. Like 5th year breakout. We're still the scout saying still like, more based on athleticism is what we like. He's still probably a little more raw. Like 5 years, that's how long it took you to break out, and you're still not refined as a player. Like I get you super cheap, so it probably doesn't make much of a difference, but like, and it's such a deep class that are you really going to have people looking at him, stacking him up? We're talking about Lad McConkey, who like I don't love. It's probably honestly a better prospect than Legette, as like, oh, Lad could be the guy who falls to 3rd. Legette it'd be a pretty big win if he got on a day 2 for me. So I don't mind that we have him this high, but because it's really late in the draft, and I like taking shots on rookies, but just
Wait, are you think it'd be a win for him to go day 2?
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if he goes day 2.
I would be surprised if he went round 2. I think it's less likely than a coin flip for round 2. I'd be more surprised if he went day 3. I think he's probably a round 3 pick. And though in the descriptions giving the dog whistles of Coleman and McConkey, the 2 guys we've probably given the most negative buzz to, isn't the best sign for how we look at the evaluations of the players internally.
No, I don't love Legette, but I think he's going day 2. I mean, he's 221. He just put up a 4.39 40, a 40-inch vert, 126-inch broad jump. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think like I would be happy to draft this guy in round 3 with a bunch of like I think he's a great 3rd round pick. I mean, that's like you should be spending 3rd round picks on, high upside guys who, yeah, I mean he didn't break out till I think his 5th year.
5th year breakout. Yeah.
5th year breakout.
He didn't.
Don't love that.
He didn't get over 200 yards until his 5th year.
Yeah, it's not ideal. But if he's going to be able to overcome, maybe he's not the most refined guy, but he has the athleticism to overcome that potentially. The other thing is, I mean,
yes, wish he overcame it in college. Would have loved to see that.
He did his final season, 3.15 yards per route run in his final season is really good.
But what was his underclassmen yards per route run?
I don't want to talk about that.
Is it below 1? It might be below 1.
I think it's below 1. It's below 1.5 because he never hit that once. Yeah. No, I think it must be below 1. So 2019, 0.42, 1.15, 0.51. Yeah, I can actually pull up his underclassmen yards per route run. It's going to be really bad. It was 0.62.
Okay, so what if you include his senior year? Not his final year because he played 5, but include his senior year. See what happens.
I'm done with this. Moving on. All right, listen. He's going to get drafted.
You shut up and listen.
Shut up and listen. He's going to get drafted round 3 because of the athleticism and size. He's going to be out there running routes in the final weeks of the season. And you know who didn't have 1 yards per route run in the NFL last year? Jahan Dotson. Okay, who's going to be running routes in week 17? Xavier Legette or Jahan Dotson? We do want to be price sensitive on Xavier Legette, but I think we still are by taking him around pick 150 ahead of ADP. We're not going to be chasing Legette up. This is not a position of us saying we're going to make sure to stay ahead of ADP on Xavier Legette. No, this is you probably don't have any Xavier Legette. It's probably a good idea to have some Xavier Legette, given the athleticism, given the draft capital, I think is probably pretty good. And so this is like kind of the time to do it before. I would hate to be taking him at 120. That seems no fun.
Yeah. And importantly, there are still ways to win with these rookie players, even if the draft capital projection, even if we think that's pretty locked in, if he goes 4th, 5th round, he can still be productive at the end of the season. I infamously said A.T. Perry was my most drafted player last year pre-draft. Thought he was going 3rd round, went early 6th, late round 5, caught touchdown in one of the playoff weeks. So just because he was out on the field, because they gave a rookie a chance to run routes at the end of the year. So that thesis will be alive with Legette no matter what round he's drafted, granted with different probabilities and more likely the earlier he gets drafted.
Right. By the way, there was a comment on the last podcast, and we're talking a lot about wide receiver athleticism. And the comment was that, the combine doesn't really matter for wide receivers. And I think it's kind of actually an interesting topic. So I wanted to bring it up since we're talking so much about the athleticism. I think wide receiver athleticism definitely matters, but it's largely baked into draft capital.
Yeah.
And so,
but I do think we're also like, every time we mention it, we're like, you say he's a good athlete, he's probably going in the 3rd round for Legette. You're probably right, honestly. He's an incredible athlete. That's so crazy how athletic he is at that size for how big he is. And we talked about it with Worthy as well. Like, to be that fast, like, the NFL is going to care a lot. And I think that's like an important distinction to make that I feel like we've made.
Yeah. But I guess what I would say, once Legette gets 3rd round capital, we're not going to be then giving him a boost for being super athletic.
Yes.
He got drafted in the 3rd round because he's super athletic. That's the only reason So
yeah,
it's
we're
like,
baking in like 80% of his athleticism right now because we're
Yes.
correlating that with his draft stock. Like maybe once he gets third round, we boost him a few picks because it wasn't a guarantee that he was going to go in the third round. But we should have most of it baked in, and we're going to be wrong on some of these guys. But on the whole, we're
Yes.
using this combine as a really good way to tool in what we think draft capital is going to be.
Exactly. I also think just, Adam Levitan has an article that he does every year where he goes through kind of like minimum thresholds that he's looking for. Like if we're looking for guys from fantasy perspective, we would like them to hit these kind of baseline, like don't be a bad athlete kind of situation. That also matters to me as well. Like I would like to see these guys kind of hit the minimums, and then the excess athleticism is really just kind of helping us dial in draft capital.
Yeah, I think that using draft capital as like instrumental or proxy variable, using athleticism as that variable for draft capital until we actually get draft capital is prudent. Once we get towards late April and we're getting enough data and sites like Grinding the Mocks will be collecting it, we can then start adjusting and saying, hey, thousands of mock drafts are having Xavier Legette in the fourth round. Then we'll probably want to adjust and say, okay, that's probably a better indicator of projected draft capital than the athleticism. And again, athleticism isn't the end all be all, but it's a heavy weighting factor for us this early in the process.
Yes. So let's talk two other really athletic guys, Ricky Pearsall and Tez Walker. Both of them Tez Walker had a 9.86 RAS, Ricky Pearsall at 9.78. Pearsall ran a 4.4140, a 42-inch vertical, 129-inch broad jump. So, he's kind of seen, I think, more as like just like a does the dirty work type of receiver, but pretty athletic. Tez Walker's athleticism not listed on RAS. Let me pull it up, but I think he was pretty fast in the 40 as well. So both guys, I think, probably in that second, third round discussion, but with that level of athleticism, I feel better about them actually, landing that draft capital. And generally with wide receivers, I really like them to go day 2. I get nervous when guys fall to day 3. We've had some really big hits from day 3. Obviously, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it's not like we're out, but generally the hit rates are much stronger for wide receivers that go day 2 rather than day 3. So I feel better about both guys with this athleticism.
Yeah, on Tez Walker, he didn't run the agility drills, and I think not a ton of guys are running the agility drills these days at wide receiver, but I do think the fact that a guy who is like clearly a straight line speedster, and he crushed it in that respect. He ran a 4.36 at 6'2", just shy of 6'2", actually, 193, 9.88 RAS, like super strong athlete. You can probably say he's probably not in the 99th percentile because he opted not to run the agility drills.
Right.
But he wins in the
also,
exact
he's terrible
way.
After the catch.
Exactly. And people are like, yeah, he's a straight line runner. He's really good at it. So I think it's intuitive to say he would not have held up a 9.88 RAS with the agility drills, but also not that big of a deal in terms of what we think he is going to do, because we knew this already. We kind of had an idea of what his skill set was, and it was to run really fast. And also he's a good high contested catch rate winner. So he did exactly what we would hope he would do at the combine based on what he did in college. And I do think he's a really interesting prospect. He's a second-year breakout. Then again, a monster dominator in a terrible situation, North Carolina, where I think Eric, is this on this pod feed where Eric talked to you about like he had a transfer situation where like wasn't allowed to play for a while, and one day they're like, buddy, you're back on the team. So to come in,
it was crazy. I mean, he like literally didn't know if he was going to play for them his final year. Didn't know the plays kind of situation. Didn't, the tape is not great on him from what I understand. Not studied it myself. When you look at UNC, but if you go back to Kent State, suddenly he looks a lot better, and it's like, well, maybe it's because he knew where to go.
And I believe his yards per route run at UNC was relatively weak as well. But like, I want to give him a lot of credit
for
the
fact.
It was
pretty decent. Let me pull it up.
Was it? Maybe it was the Kent State year. I don't remember. But I like even like the same thing with the tape. Like if the tape's not great for a guy who didn't know any of the plays and didn't know if he was going to be playing, And he still put up numbers, right? Maybe it wasn't the prettiest numbers you've ever seen, but still put up like a really strong dominator as well, I believe. Like, I'm going to give him a lot of credit for that. And then he goes to the combine and reaffirms that that's exactly who he is. He's a bursty, rangy speed guy with reasonable size. Like, actually, I like Tez Walker a lot in terms of like deep shots he can take.
Yeah. 32% dominator rating at UNC. And he did that with okay efficiency, 2.28 yards per route run. He had a 50% dominator rating at 2022 at Kent State. You want guesses on how many games? Because, dominator rating can be driven by touchdowns. He had a 65% touchdown share. So, that's definitely driving it. 36% yardage share. You only play a few games. You can have this outrageous dominator rating. Guesses on games? How many games he played?
9.
I assume he played like nearly the whole season. 11.
12.
Oh, he played all night.
It's a legit 50%. Now,
yeah.
It is touchdown driven, as I mentioned, 36% yardage share, but that's still really good.
Yeah, 36 is like 30 is a really strong predictive threshold for us, even at Kent State. Like doing it in your second year, 36. If it was just 36 touchdown and 36 yards, you'd be like, that is a good breakout season.
Right.
And then for him to carry it over to UNC proves that it wasn't purely based on him playing a lower level of competition. And on top of that, it wasn't just a 36% dominator he crushed in the touchdown department, which also does obviously matter.
Yeah, we do like that. Touchdowns can be quite helpful. 2.62 yards per route run that 2022 season at Kent State. So, which isn't like amazing, but it's starting to get where you're like, that's pretty good. So, Tez Walker, I would say a guy, if he were to get like super, super buzzy, I would start to be a little bit nervous about the yards after catch. He's a 4-year guy. You do have some concerns about the production profile. It's not perfect. But yeah, just with the athleticism coming in, starting to feel really, really good about a bull stance that we've had the entire way on him. But now I think it's a weird thing where like now I'm even more confident. We're 27 picks above ADP on him. But again, like the difference between pick 200 and pick 159 is not really that much. So I think there's a lot of wrong answers on this board right now. As we scroll around, there's a bunch of guys you're sorry you picked, starting to feel pretty confident he's, at least someone you're happy to have on your advancing rosters. If you flip over the cards and it's week 16 and you got Tez Walker, I think you probably feel pretty okay about that.
Yeah. And I think that sentiment is a good description of how we want all these late round rookies. You want to just mix enough of them into your portfolio, because even if they go down ADP, there's still paths to paying off. And especially if they go up in ADP, get the draft capital, or just flat out play well, which is probably the most important thing, you have ways for them to pay off. So this is like the rookie. And then our ratings accordingly are sort of flashing signs to say, yeah, you should be mixing this player in overweight positions generally if they're not named Keon Coleman.
Yeah. And hopefully he falls and we can take him. I don't want to be fading these rookies a bunch. Javon Baker, we need to add the rookie tag to him, weirdly. Baker is someone I'm starting to get pretty excited about. Out of UCF, not like my favorite profile. He just was like a classic guy. I'm like, he's just kind of got lost in the shuffle for me a little bit. Like he's kind of fine. But Baker, what was his athleticism? Did he fully test or not? Do we have a Racz on him?
I think it was in the 7s, but we should probably double check.
Let's see. Javon Baker, 4.54 40.
Yeah, 7.7
inch vertical, 121 inch broad jump.
Yeah, 7.71 Racz. So decent athlete, functional, not extraordinary, but I think we're more likely than not to get round 3 draft capital. I think Dane Brugler, though it could have been one of the other premier film analysts, had some positive things to say about him. So again, another player you should be mixing in.
Yeah, I think it's like the draft capital starting to feel decent about that. Didn't crush the combine, so we're not like as excited as like Pearsall and Tez Walker, but he's starting to stand out a little bit from some of the other like total dart throws. Although, where did Jermaine Burton go? He's above here, I think. Let's see. Jermaine Burton, 185. He's another guy that I'm starting to feel pretty good about. Oh, we're actually ahead of Baker's ahead of Burton. Maybe I've gotten too excited on Baker because I like Burton a lot. Burton was productive in his final season at Alabama. He's a very kind of, he's going to be an annoying fantasy player. Definitely a better in best ball type of guy where he didn't like very low targets per route run, true deep threat type. Only had 39 receptions in his final season, and that was the good year. Kind of going to be boom bust. But we like that archetype more in best ball for sure. And he tested very well at the combine as well. So those are kind of two of my favorite dart throws. Burton more for the athleticism boom bust profile. Baker is kind of more. We think he's getting decent draft capital. Seems like a pretty solid player looking at the profile.
Yeah, and importantly, when we look at these players, the rookies are probably the best bets to not be awful players. We have 2 years of evidence with Treylon Burks, 3 years with Rashad Bateman. Though this year, I swear it'll be different with Rashad Bateman. After 3.
Harbaugh talked him up at the combine or whatever, the opening pressers. This is the one, baby. We're getting all ready coming to get back.
Hurt.
So at what point in the martingale strategy does it tell you you've run out of money? Because I think we've reached that with Bateman, but I didn't actually get that far in the book about doing the martingale strategy.
You ran out before you even got to that part of the book?
Yeah.
You're
right, though, that I'm pretty sure, and I liked Burks and Bateman as prospects, and even Elijah Moore, and we can be pretty sure that they're not very good. Maybe they turn things around and they're serviceable, but that would be a win if these guys are solid teams' third receivers at this point. Would be a win relative to where they are. Burton, Baker, and the guys going in this range, they're probably not as likely to be a team's third receiver maybe over the course of their career, but they're much more likely at this point to be a team's second or a 1B because they still have that in the range of outcomes. I don't think they have that in the range of outcomes for Burks and Bateman anymore.
I mean, if the Browns just bring back Joe Flacco at quarterback, they'll get Elijah Moore humming like he's done in the 5 or 6 game sample. But besides that, he's been atrocious. He only steps up when he gets competent quarterback play, so can't really fault him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think through these is at this point, who's more likely to give you a spike week in week 15, 16, or 17? That is what we're drafting. We're in the 180s here. That pays off the pick, and we'd love to hit on a Puka. We'd love to hit on a Kyron, but those are hard to find and they're not available every year. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. So if you can get one nice spike week out of a guy in this range, which I honestly do think Bateman and Burks are still alive for, so is Elijah Moore. That's why they're here. But, this is a spot where Burton, Baker are starting to emerge as pretty interesting versions of that bet. So yeah, I think we're still need the draft capital come through. If I would say post-draft, we're probably going to have to lower a fair amount of these wide receivers because not all of them are going to go day 2. Yeah. But the ones who we raise, we probably still are going to be raising substantially. So we've said this a bunch of times, but I do think you want to spread out your bets because we're going to miss with this group, but we're going to miss with low value picks that aren't worth a bunch. And we're going to hit by getting guys who are seriously adding to our roster and at a big discount relative to what they're going to cost this summer. So that's the overall play here. And if that is the play, then you don't want to show up with a giant bag of Jermaine Burton and be like, I did it. I drafted rookies. No, because Burton's a 6th rounder. Unexpectedly, the NFL just wasn't interested in, and that's not going to do anything for you now. So
yeah. In the ideas of searching for spike weeks, again, with 20 rounds, you have 2 more spots to attempt to get one of those spike weeks. It's why Darius Slayton's been a fixture of a lot of, I think, sharper drafters, especially 20-round rosters, because you're just hunting for the 50 to 60-yard touchdown or 4 catches, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. a few intermediate plays sprinkled in. So now's the time to do it and the chance to get extreme ADP returns, even though you acknowledge there is some downside risk, because inevitably a few of these rookies will go lower than expected, just like many will go higher than expected. So part of the game.
Yeah, I think it's like one of these things. I don't think the market is fully pricing in the upside that these guys are second round picks or even third round picks with some of them. And so it's like, even if they go at expected or slightly higher than expected, they're going to rise substantially in ADP. I mean, if Jermaine Burton is a second round pick, with a solid landing spot, he's going at 185 at the end of August. Like, there's no way.
Rashee Rice,
pick, and now we completely forget about it.
Yeah, Rashee Rice went from basically undrafted final few rounds to around ADP 130 and still proved to be one of the best values. I don't know where Sky Moore went pre-draft. I know where he went at the end of August of his rookie year. So you're getting potential.
I would say Marvin Mims is probably a better example than Rice, because Mims was not someone we were really drafting in the big board. At the very end, after he ran really well at the combine, he started to get drafted some. But was like, I remember I did a draft with Zach Kruger on FFPC before the combine, and he floated Marvin Mims as like our last round pick. And I was like, oh, I need to look more into Marvin Mims. And so, shout out to Zach for being ahead of the curve, because then Mims didn't have a really productive rookie year, but he got a lot more expensive. And I think this is kind of the range when we talk not just Burton, but Baker, Tez Walker, Ricky Pearsall. Like, that's kind of the range we're talking about, where, maybe this guy's going in like the 12th round or the 11th round, depending on, like, if he gets a really good landing spot, maybe they're in the single digit rounds. Even if they don't, but the draft capital comes in, they're going to move up a lot in ADP from the 180s. So most excited about the Pearsall Walker duo. Still a little bit excited about Burton and Baker. They're down in the 200s. We are a little bit interested in the Washington guys. Jalen McMillan we're ahead on. Jalen Polk we're actually slightly behind on, but certainly not out on him. I've actually taken a fair amount of him. He tends to fall in like any given draft. He'll fall, and you can grab him a little bit past ADP. We're 1.6 picks behind ADP, so not a big fade stance there by any means. Any of these other rookies to talk through before we move on and talk Dalton Schultz for the last 4 minutes?
No, well, I didn't have any other rookies. You're gonna love this though. Hayden Hurst was cut, so we could probably drop another 30 minutes in here on that, and then I think we're good now.
What team was he on?
Panthers. Oh. They cut him for $52,000 in savings. I kid you not.
Yeah, they gave him like a 3-year, $21 million contract. Something.
Yeah, his contract's like fully guaranteed this year, and they cut him anyways.
Okay.
Sorry, I think we ran the gamut of rookies. For me, and I have it out at 2:30. So
okay, well, let's talk Dalton Schultz. Who there was talk last year of like, what is the point of Dalton Schultz, and you can take Hayden Hurst, that kind of thing. And it's like they're actually a pretty big difference. Dalton Schultz just signed a 3-year deal, and maybe we were a little too bearish on his chances of returning. Has not been someone that you've had a ton of if you've been using the rankings. We want him now. This is a big deal that he's back with the Texans. Schultz is, to the point of like the Hayden Hurst stuff. He's probably not that different than a Hayden Hurst from a talent perspective. Maybe he's a little bit better, but he's not like this big difference-making talent, but he's good enough. And now he's tied to CJ Stroud. This is, as we were discussing where to put him, is he that different than Dallas Goedert, who's going still like in our rankings? We have him 16 picks behind Dallas Goedert, but that's an ADP thing. I think if his ADP rises substantially, the ranking will rise along with Dalton Schultz. I think he'd be totally fine if you're taking him around pick 100 or just after.
Yeah. And with Schultz pre-free agency, there are rumors that he was drawing heavy interest from teams with cap space. Generally, the teams with cap space are the ones you don't want to be going to that much. The Patriots were floated as a big target.
God.
And again, player goes to the Patriots, probably going to lower them this offseason. So I think the
Texans probably use that as leverage. You're going to end up signing with the Patriots unless you resign, bud.
Yeah, so we feel good with Schultz. Immediately, once we saw the contract, said, how many of these fools can we put him above? Answer was at least 30 of them. So
at least Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Schultz, Kyle?
No, I'm just imagining them, like, whoever is doing the contract negotiations, sending Schultz and his camp the link to Over the Cap. That's just like 2024 cap table sorted, and like Patriots are at the top. Commanders maybe isn't that bad, but like Titans are at the top or whatever. And he's like, all right, I'm coming back.
I love it. All right. That'll do it for this episode. I'm going to be doing another episode very shortly with Davis Maddock talking through some of the combine stuff. So there's more rookie combine talk on the way. But thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kyle, for jumping on. Anything you want to shout out, guys?
I'll have an article. I pulled my Tez Walker and my Jermaine Burton stuff from an article that will probably be out. We'll call it Wednesday.
All right. Check that out. I'll see you very soon. Enjoy your big board drafts. And yeah, be back on soon with Davis Maddock. Talk to you then.